The calm setting had its own rhythm, a steady pulse that made everything feel safe and familiar. The sun sat high enough to warm the pavement, but not enough to push anyone into the shade. Conversations drifted across the open space in quiet little pockets. A couple of parents talked about weekend plans while kids chased each other near the benches. Dogs tugged at their leashes. Someone watered the planters by the entrance, the soft hiss of the hose mixing with the faint hum of a passing car. It was the kind of afternoon that made people loosen their shoulders and let their guard slip, because why would anything go wrong here? The place was ordinary in the best way, built on routines and small comforts that made it easy to believe everyone would behave. Nothing felt urgent. Nothing felt sharp. Even the air seemed to carry a sense of ease. The woman at the center of it all moved through the space like she belonged there, quiet, unbothered, almost invisible in the way people who carry themselves with confidence often are. She was checking her phone, pausing here and there to greet neighbors with a simple nod. No one paid close attention because there was no reason to. She blended right in. She looked like anyone else running errands or stopping by after a long day. And for a while, everything stayed that way. People kept talking. Children kept laughing. A jogger slowed down to stretch near a tree. Life moved without friction. The stillness of the moment made what happened next feel even more out of place. But right then, before anything broke the peace, the whole area felt balanced. The kind of balance that puts people at ease, lowers instincts, and makes danger seem like something that happens elsewhere. The group of men who would eventually disrupt everything was also present, but no one noticed them at first. They leaned against a wall, talking among themselves, not standing out in any particular way. Their voices blended into the noise around them, low enough to avoid drawing attention, but loud enough to hint at impatience if anyone had been listening closely. Most people were not. The woman continued walking, steady and relaxed, unaware of the shift that was about to unfold. Even the birds seemed comfortable, perched along the roofline, barely moving. A bicycle rolled past the entrance. A teen crossed the path with a bag of snacks. Everything pointed toward an ordinary afternoon with nothing remarkable to report. And because of that, no one had a reason to look twice at anything. Peace has a way of blinding people to small warning signs, and this place was wrapped in enough comfort to soften every edge. The quiet made the space seem smaller, like sound traveled only as far as it needed to before settling. People smiled without thinking. Doors opened and closed with slow familiarity. It was the kind of environment where nothing loud should happen, nothing violent, nothing unpredictable. That made the upcoming shift feel almost impossible. But the truth is that calm places often set the stage for sudden turns. The contrast becomes sharper, the disruption becomes heavier, and the moment right before everything changes becomes unforgettable. The woman stopped briefly to tie her shoe. A man nearby checked his watch. Somewhere behind them, a conversation about yard work carried on. A dog barked at a passing skateboarder and then settled down again. The smell of someone's lunch drifted through the warm air. It was all so ordinary that it created a false sense of stability. A place built on routine can make even the alert lower their defenses. She had no reason to stand differently, or look around, or scan for threats. No one else did either. They trusted the environment, trusted the familiarity, trusted the simple truth that nothing bad usually happened here. The men in the corner shifted their stance slightly, but even that movement meant nothing to anyone watching. Mainly because no one was watching. They were just part of the scenery. Their presence merged with the background the same way parked cars or benches did. And in that moment, the calm was complete. Everyone played their part in the quiet balance of the afternoon without knowing how quickly the tone would flip. The space held that soft, predictable energy, a slow current that encouraged people to relax into it. This calm was not forced or artificial. It was the kind that grows from repetition, from long stretches of peace, from a shared belief that the day would stay steady. And in that belief, the tension had room to build unnoticed. They did not look dangerous at first. Most people would have glanced past them without a second thought. Three men talking among themselves, trying to look relaxed while giving off an edge they probably thought no one would notice. They stood just far enough from the main walkway to seem uninvolved, yet close enough that anyone passing by would still fall within their line of sight. Their attention drifted from one passerby to another until it settled on the woman. Something about her ease, her quiet confidence, or maybe the simple fact that she walked alone made them focus on her, as if she were an easy mark. They watched her with a kind of careless interest that said they liked the idea of having power over someone who looked like she would not fight back. They saw her size, her posture, the way she kept to herself, and they built a picture in their minds. They assumed she would avoid confrontation. They assumed she would not talk back. They assumed she would not make a scene. And above all, they assumed she was ordinary. Those assumptions became the lens through which they judged her, and that lens made them braver than they should have been. When she walked past them the first time, they barely shifted. One of them made a low comment, something meant to get a reaction. She did not give him one. She kept walking, focused on her task, refusing to let their presence affect her. Instead of discouraging them, her calm seemed to provoke them. They took her silence as weakness. They took her composure as an invitation. People like them often misread stillness. They see a quiet person and decide they can take advantage because they have never been in front of someone who knows how to control a situation without showing it. The moment she circled back toward the entrance, their posture changed. They straightened a little. They stepped away from the wall. Their eyes followed her with a sharper intent. It was not planned, not coordinated, but built on the quick and reckless idea that they could impose themselves on someone who looked like she would not push back. They were not the kind of men who look for equals to challenge. They looked for targets. That difference shaped everything that followed. They moved to intercept her path without announcing it. One stepped slightly ahead, pretending it was coincidence. Another shifted closer, just enough to invade her space. Their approach was subtle enough to appear accidental to anyone glancing over, but deliberate enough that she would have to notice. They wanted control through proximity. They wanted her to feel cornered. They wanted to force her into reacting on their terms. People like them use intimidation as their first tool because they rely on fear to do most of the work. She stopped short of bumping into the first man. Her posture stayed level. Her gaze steady. She did not show the slightest sign of being rattled. That calm only fed their misjudgment. They saw someone who refused to escalate, and instead of recognizing discipline, they labeled it as vulnerability. One of them muttered something under his breath, a comment designed to get a rise out of her. She stayed still. They took it as proof they were right. Crowds moved behind them, unaware of the shift forming right in front of them. People carried bags, pushed strollers, held conversations, and never thought to look twice because nothing yet looked dramatic. The men counted on that. They believed they could corner her without anyone noticing until it was too late. That belief made their confidence rise. It made their gestures bolder. It made their voices drop into a tone that signaled ownership they had no right to claim. They flanked her slightly, forming a loose triangle meant to trap her without touching her yet. She kept her breathing steady. She assessed each of them quietly, noting distance, angle, and intent. They read none of that. They only saw what they wanted to see, a woman alone. A woman smaller than them. A woman outnumbered. And because they knew nothing about her background, nothing about her training, nothing about the strength she kept under control, they wrote a story in their heads where they were the ones with the advantage. Every small gesture they made reinforced their illusion. One man cracked his knuckles as if to display confidence. Another smirked in a way he probably thought looked intimidating. The third shifted his weight forward, testing her reaction. Their assumptions fueled each other. Their confidence fed on misunderstanding. They believed they had chosen someone easy to overpower. They believed this would be simple. They believed the moment was theirs to control. They had no idea how wrong they were. It happened fast, so fast that most of the people nearby would later struggle to remember the exact moment the line was crossed. 1 second the tension was simmering, the next it snapped. The shift did not begin with a shout or a dramatic gesture. It started with a small movement, a step closer than anyone wanted, a tilt of the chin that signaled a challenge none of them had earned. The woman did not react. She held her position with controlled stillness, a posture so steady it only irritated the men more. They wanted flinching. They wanted fear. When they did not get it, frustration took over instinct. One man moved first, the one nearest her shoulder. His voice rose just enough to cut through the space between them, demanding a reaction he still believed he could force out of her. She did not give him that either. She kept her eyes forward, kept her breathing measured, kept her center balanced. Anyone trained could see what she was doing. Anyone untrained would only see a quiet woman staying calm. The men fell into the second category, which made their next decision reckless. The shove was sudden, not powerful, not even controlled, more of a push fueled by irritation. His hand hit her arm, trying to knock her off balance. She shifted just a fraction, steadying herself with a precision he was too angry to notice. If he had been paying attention, he might have caught the way her muscles tightened, the way her stance adjusted. Instead, he mistook her smooth recovery as another sign that he could escalate without consequences. True danger often starts with a small misread, and this misread grew fast. The second man took his cue from the first. He stepped in with a louder voice, leaning into her personal space. His words were sharp, designed to provoke, the kind of taunts used by people who rely on intimidation instead of skill. She still did not engage. Her silence did not waver. Her control did not crack. The calm she carried only made their aggression spike, because they could not understand a steady presence that did not bend to their behavior. Around them, the world kept moving. A child laughed in the distance. A door opened with a soft click. Shoes scuffed the pavement as someone walked by, without noticing the storm forming in the center of the walkway. Noise wrapped around the scene like a shield, hiding the conflict from anyone who was not looking directly at it. That level of invisibility made the men even bolder. They believed they could push farther before anyone intervened. The third man stepped behind her. It was a move meant to trap her, to create the illusion that escape was no longer possible. He glanced toward his friends, seeking approval, searching for the moment he could contribute something that would make him look tough. But he was not the one who escalated. It was the first man again, the one who had been the most eager to prove something. His face tightened with irritation that she still refused to react. That irritation needed an outlet, and he chose the worst one. His leg came up with the clumsy momentum of someone who wanted to hurt, but did not understand how strikes worked. It was not clean technique. It was not precise. It was fueled by anger, not skill. The kick landed on her stomach with a dull thud, harder than a shove, but far from controlled. It forced her backward a step. The air shifted around them, as if the entire space inhaled at once. Even the men themselves seemed startled for a split second, surprised at how far one of them had gone. People nearby felt something before they understood it. A woman dropping recyclables paused mid-motion. A man walking his dog slowed down, but did not know why. The sound of the kick had not been loud, but it carried a weight that cut through the lazy afternoon rhythm. It sent a signal, quiet but sharp, that something was no longer normal. The men expected fear. They expected pain. They expected collapse. They waited for her to make a sound, to fold inward, to finally react in a way that confirmed the story they had written in their heads. They did not see the subtle shift in her stance. They did not notice the way her shoulders squared, the way her breath tightened into something controlled, the way her eyes changed focus. They only saw what they wanted to see. They thought they had won the moment. They thought the kick had established dominance. They thought the fight had finally started on their terms. They had no understanding of what they had actually triggered. The moment the kick landed, something in the air tightened. It was not loud, not dramatic, but the reaction from the space around them shifted in a way that everyone felt even if they could not explain it. Sound seemed to thin out. Movement slowed. People who had been going about their business felt a prickle of tension without realizing why. A few heads turned on instinct, drawn by the strange stillness that settled over the walkway. It was the kind of silence that happens right before a storm breaks, when the world pauses as if it senses a change in pressure. Those closest to the scene did not understand what they were witnessing yet. They saw a woman take a hit and remain on her feet. They saw three men standing too close, their hands tense, their faces carrying the unmistakable look of people ready to take things further. What they did not see was the internal shift inside her, the controlled recalculation happening beneath her calm exterior. Her breath drew in, steady but sharper than before. Her eyes flicked between them, assessing distance, timing, and intent. She would not be the one to escalate. She never was. But she had been pushed into a point where reaction was no longer a choice, but a necessity. One man in the crowd froze with a shopping bag in his hand, completely unsure whether he was seeing the start of a fight or a misunderstanding that would resolve itself. Another paused while locking her bike, her gaze pulled toward the sudden stillness in the center of the walkway. A couple walking their dog slowed until they came to a full stop, their conversation fading as their attention shifted. Humans have a natural instinct to read danger, even when they do not consciously recognize it. And in that moment, danger sat in the air like static waiting for the first spark. The three men did not feel the same hesitation. Their confidence stayed high because they had not yet understood the shift happening right in front of them. They mistook her stillness for shock. They took her silence as surrender. They believed they had her contained, that she was overwhelmed and vulnerable. Their assumptions held them in a bubble of arrogance that made them blind to the way her posture changed. She dropped her weight slightly, grounding herself. Her shoulders angled. Her center tightened. None of it was dramatic enough for an untrained eye to register, but to someone who knows how to read body language, she had moved into a ready position. People continued to freeze as the tension climbed. A jogger slowed mid-stride, trying to understand why the air felt heavier. A child tugged on her mother's sleeve and asked a question too quietly to be heard. The mother did not even answer. She was staring at the three men, her instincts whispering that something was wrong even if she could not yet see what had happened. Small groups of bystanders formed unintentionally as individuals slowed and stopped, drawn together by the same instinctive caution. One of the men seemed to realize the situation had caught attention, and he glanced around with a flicker of irritation. He did not like an audience. He muttered something to his friends, and they shifted slightly closer to the woman, trying to block the view. That only made the tension spike further. People could not see clearly, but they could feel the unease gathering like pressure before a breaking point. The woman stayed calm. Her face held no anger, no fear, just focus. The kind of focus that unsettles anyone paying close attention. Her stillness was not passive anymore. It was measured, controlled, the kind of stillness that precedes action. The crowd did not understand it, but they felt it in their bones. A subtle pulse of anticipation rippled through them, a quiet message that something was about to change. A teenager stopped mid-step, eyes wide, sensing something significant even though he could not see it. An older man near the door took a slow step back, not wanting to interfere, but also not wanting to be too close. Someone holding a cup of coffee tightened their grip without meaning to. Even the ambient noise, the distant conversations, the rustle of movement, seemed to dim, as if the environment itself understood the need to brace. In the center of it all, time felt suspended. The men squared their shoulders, believing they controlled the moment. The woman adjusted her stance by a fraction, settling into a readiness that came from training rather than adrenaline. The crowd held its breath without knowing it was doing so. Every element in the scene aligned into a single point of tension, drawn tight enough that any small movement would snap it. Everyone waited, some consciously, some instinctively, feeling the unmistakable shift that happens when a situation moves from uncomfortable to dangerous. The tension did not shout. It did not flare. It simply stood there, alive in the space between them, thick enough that anyone who walked into it would understand they had stepped into something they could not ignore. Her training lived in her muscles, not in the form of a dramatic transformation, but in the quiet, precise shift that only those with real experience ever show. The kick had triggered something automatic, a response shaped by years of discipline rather than anger. She did not tense up with panic. She did not retreat. She dropped into an internal calm so deep that it rewired the entire moment. The men standing in front of her could not feel it, but anyone who had ever trained at a high level would have recognized the shift immediately. She moved from being a bystander to someone fully engaged, fully aware, and fully prepared. Her breath settled into a controlled pattern. Not shallow, not shaky, but deliberate. The kind of breathing taught to keep the mind clear and the body ready. Her feet adjusted by an inch, just enough to ground her weight without giving away intent. Her shoulders aligned. Her center tightened. Every movement was small but exact, the kind that says a fight is already over long before it starts. She was not preparing to attack. She was preparing to neutralize, to finish what they had started in the most efficient way possible. The men still did not understand what they were facing. They saw only a woman recovering from a hit, not someone stepping into a tactical mindset. Their arrogance kept them blind. One smirked, thinking he had hurt her. Another cracked his knuckles again, believing this was the part where she would beg them to stop. The third shifted his weight forward like he wanted to throw the next strike. Not one of them realized that every move they made was being mapped, tracked, categorized. Her eyes flicked between them, measuring their positions with the accuracy of someone who had run these calculations thousands of times. Crowds do not always recognize skill, but instinct tells people when something is off. A few bystanders felt the unease sharpen, watching the woman in a way they could not explain. They saw her posture change and felt a chill race up their spine, even if they did not know why. A man holding a bag of groceries found himself stepping back. A young woman who had slowed her walk now stopped completely, drawn by a sense that something significant was happening in the space between these four people. The men, still believing they had the upper hand, pressed in. One reached out as if to shove her again. His hand never touched her. Her arm moved in a smooth, controlled arc, redirecting his reach with a level of precision so quick and efficient that most of the crowd missed it. She did not jerk or hit. She simply moved his hand away with a motion that belonged to someone who understood leverage and timing better than any of them ever would. The man looked startled, not because of pain, but because he had lost control without understanding how. The others bristled, their confidence shaken for the first time. They tried to read her expression, expecting fear or anger, maybe defiance. Instead, they found nothing. Her face remained calm, focused, completely steady. That unshakable steadiness unnerved them more than any threat could have. They were used to loud reactions, wild panic, or loud pushback. They were not prepared for a quiet professional who knew exactly how to handle three untrained aggressors. Her posture continued to adjust with the subtlety of habit. She angled her stance to keep all three men in her field of view. She kept her hands relaxed but ready. Her breathing stayed even. Every part of her moved with purpose. People trained to fight do not waste energy. They do not lash out blindly. They do not posture. They calculate. They conserve. They respond only when needed. That was what she was doing now. A few members of the crowd exchanged uneasy glances, sensing she was operating on a level far beyond anything the men understood. Someone whispered, trying to piece together what they were seeing. Another lifted a phone halfway, uncertain whether to record or wait. Tension continued to gather, but around her it felt different. She was not tense. She was composed, controlled, prepared. The men circled, still trying to intimidate her, still believing numbers would carry them through. They tried to speak over her, to box her in, to claim the moment. But with every step they took, her training dismantled their advantage. She kept the center. She guided the distance. She set the tempo. They still had no idea what they were dealing with, no idea that the fight they thought they controlled had already slipped out of their hands. They had mistaken her calm for weakness. They were about to learn what calm really meant. The first man lunged, aiming for her shoulder, expecting her to recoil or stumble. She didn't. Her movement was clean and efficient, the kind that comes from countless hours of drills. She stepped off the line of his attack, redirected his momentum with a turn of her body, and let gravity finish the job. He went down before he understood what had happened. There was no flourish, no wasted strength, just a simple application of balance and timing. The crowd gasped, not because the move was dramatic, but because of how effortless it looked. He had thrown himself at her. She had simply guided him to the ground. The second man reacted with the panic of someone realizing the situation had shifted out of his control. He swung at her in a wide, untrained arc. She avoided it with a small shift backward, a movement so smooth it looked like she had known the punch was coming long before he threw it. Her hand caught his wrist, turned it, and used his own force to fold him downward until he had no choice but to drop to one knee. Again, nothing excessive. No strikes. No anger. Pure technique. Controlled. Precise. People watching began to understand that they were not seeing luck. They were watching skill, the kind that only comes from training under pressure. A couple of bystanders exchanged stunned looks. Someone whispered that she must have practiced something, though the specifics were beyond them. All they knew was that the men who had started the confrontation were losing ground fast. The third man hesitated, the confidence he carried earlier dissolving into confusion. He kept glancing between his fallen friends and the woman standing calmly in front of him. He tried to regain the posture he had earlier, tried to puff himself up, but his voice cracked when he spoke. She did not answer. She didn't need to. Her stance told him everything he needed to know. She was not afraid. She was not overwhelmed. She was assessing, ready for whatever he did next. He tried a kick then, sloppier and more frantic than the first one that had started the entire shift. She caught his leg with a movement so quick some of the crowd missed it. She stepped in, took his balance away in an instant, and guided him to the ground with the same efficiency she had used on the others. He hit the pavement with surprise rather than pain, staring up at her with wide eyes, trying to make sense of how she had dismantled their confidence so completely. The crowd fully understood now that they were witnessing something rare. It wasn't just a fight. It was someone trained to de-escalate through controlled action. She did not gloat. She did not taunt. She simply stood there with a steady breath and a posture that showed she was ready if they tried to get up again. Her calm was stronger than any threat. It was the kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly what you can do and exactly how little you need to show to prove it. Around them, the tension that had filled the air shifted again, this time into something like collective clarity. People began speaking in low voices, trying to piece together what had happened. Someone stepped forward to check on the man who had fallen first. Another person touched the woman's arm gently, asking if she was all right. She nodded, still composed, still centered. Her focus had not shifted to pride or relief. It stayed where her training kept it, on awareness. She scanned the surroundings, making sure there were no more threats, no more surprises. The men on the ground finally understood. Their earlier arrogance had drained completely. They had targeted someone they thought would be easy to intimidate. They had expected fear, retreat, surrender. Instead, they had run into discipline shaped by years of training meant for real danger. They realized too late that nothing they had brought to this moment compared to what she carried quietly within her. She didn't tower over them. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't celebrate. She simply stood ready, letting the moment settle on its own. That quiet authority did more to end the confrontation than any strike could have. One by one, the men stopped trying to get up. The message was clear without her saying a single word. The fight was over, not because she had relied on force, but because she had used skill to take control of the situation with absolute precision. The crowd around them felt the shift, the final settling of tension, the realization that calm, when held by someone trained, is stronger than any threat.